I'm so pleased to join you by video, and by way of introduction, my name is Marsha Blackburn. I have represented Tennessee's 7th Congressional District in Congress, and it has been an honor to work with many of you and to receive the Friend of the Farmer Award. As many of you know, I grew up in South Mississippi in what my mom always said was a good 4-H club, Farm Bureau, Baptist Church, and Republican Party kind of family. And I attended college on a 4-H club scholarship. And that led me to working my way through school selling books door to door for the Southwestern Company that is headquartered here in the Nashville, Tennessee area. And Chuck and I have lived in Williamson County. We have 2 married children and 2 grandchildren. Every day I go to work to defend faith, family freedom, hope, and opportunity.
I'm Phil Bredesen, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate because I've watched Washington over the last decade get more and more dysfunctional, less and less able to deal with the issues and problems and opportunities in our country. It's turned into this super partisan place where all anyone does is stand on opposite sides of the room and shout at each other. In our country, we're not just one culture, there's different cultures, there's urban and rural. I'm from a rural area myself, and I know the difficulties that exist in getting jobs located in these areas and getting services like broadband in these areas. I want to help fix that, and you can't do that if nothing gets done in Washington. I think my reputation as governor was to be bipartisan, to get things done, and I'd like to bring that to Washington. My first 3 priorities are going to be, first of all, just getting back to getting things done. We need to start doing big projects again in this country like we used to, not just chipping around at the edges, or worse yet, standing on opposite sides of the room and shouting at each other. The second priority for me is health care. First of all, in rural areas of our state, we have some real access problems, hospitals that are closing, difficulty in recruiting doctors to come there. We have an enormous opioid crisis, which is at its worst in some of our rural areas, and that the Congress has got to do something about it. They have got a drug problem in Congress, and they need to start working on it. And third of all, I'd love to see us begin working on cutting down this deficit we're building up and pushing these enormous responsibilities off to future generations. I think the job of grown-ups is to make things better for the next generation, not worse, and we need to stop piling on debt the way we are and start dealing with our issues.
You've asked about the top 3 goals. What would be the first things to work on? Well, of course, first of all is having the Senate be functional. I think the Senate is basically broken or dysfunctional, and they need to act like the Republican majority that they are. This means getting things done and finished into the president's desk. The issues that are most important to Tennesseans are good constitutional judges who are going to abide by the rule of law, who are not going to be activist judges and legislate from the bench. I also hear from many of you that getting some of these regulations off the books is mighty important. I share that goal, and certainly with the EPA and WOTUS. The other is tax cuts, making certain that we focus on keeping the Trump tax cuts and that we get tax cuts 2.0 done. My philosophy on how you get to that healthy balance between economic activity and appropriate regulation is really pretty simple. I use it as a formulary, and it is this: less taxation plus less regulation plus less litigation equals more innovation and job creation. I know that that is something that you see every day. I certainly see it, and we hear from small business owners that it applies to them in so many different areas. Whether you're on Main Street trying to do a business, or you have an agribusiness that you are trying to grow, what you want to do is have less government interference and less compliance cost, and of course protection from a litigious society. That allows you to move forward with confidence. Of course, when it comes to regulation, I know the EPA is right at the top of your list of regulators that and regulatory bodies that we'd like to kind of rein in. We've talked so much about WOTUS and getting WOTUS off the books, and yes, we continue to support that. We also want to make certain that the EPA is not on the farm trying to regulate spilled milk or trying to regulate mud puddles. This is what you call overreach, and as the EPA for so many years got off of their mission and began to move into other areas, this is what you saw. It's why it is so imperative that we rein in the EPA. One of the things that had not been lost on me with the EPA, during an oversight hearing, I asked the woman that was the administrator for the agency at that point if she had conducted cost-benefit analysis on a rule that was causing a lot of headaches. It was an overreach, and her response was very telling. She said, no, we are focused on the outcome. We are not focused on cost-benefit analysis. Well, guess what? You're focused on cost-benefit analysis every single day. It is called making a profit and being in the position to grow that business so you can pass it on to your children, to your grandchildren. And many of our Tennessee farmers have those farms and businesses that they do want to be able to pass on to their children and their grandchildren. You know, we know that regulation costs Americans about $1.9 trillion a year. If it were an economy, it would be about the 12th largest economy on the face of the earth. Now think about that. When our regulatory burden costs more than the entire budget or the entire productivity of some of our allies. And we know that the federal government never, ever gets enough of the taxpayers' money. They are always going to be on your back and in your pocket. That's why I say let's get them off your back and out of your pocket, and why we need to be reducing the cost of compliance. I have to tell you that many of the Democrats that are in Washington, D.C. look at rules and regulations as having the full force of law. And they want to make certain that rules and regulations are there to kind of rein you in and tell you what to do. If we can get government off your back, we free you up to make those wise decisions, to how to innovate, to how to create new jobs, to how to grow your business, and to achieve your version of the American dream. One of the things that I am going to be consistent in doing as your U.S. Senator is rolling back and cutting as much of that bureaucratic red tape as I possibly can. And I'll do it every single day. And I will tell you this, number one on my list is always the EPA. Farmers are faced every single day with regulations that make their jobs harder, and this is one of the reasons that I appreciate many of you who have an ongoing conversation with me to help me better understand how regulations that are going on the books. It may be the electronic driving logs, it may be EPA regulations, sometimes it's OSHA or DHS regulations, but thank you for weighing in and letting me know what is one of the best ways to serve you. As we have had our conversations through the years, the last several years, about high-speed internet and rural broadband, it has been such an honor to lead on this issue for you. I fully understand that you can't have 21st century healthcare, 21st century economic development, or 21st century education without access to high-speed internet. Recently, I have moved forward with the Precision Agriculture Bill and the Access Broadband Bill, both of those coming under my leadership as chairman of the Telecommunications and Technology Subcommittee. And we know this is going to help you as you grow your businesses. Now, when it comes to education, I tell you, I look at this one as a mom. And I have talked to many of you who have to, once the kids come home from school and they do their chores and eat supper, you get back in the truck or the van and you head back into town to get access to a Wi-Fi signal so the kids can finish their homework and get that in before the deadline. This is one of the reasons we need to make certain that we have access to high-speed internet, and why you don't have DC picking winners and losers how to do that. All of the legislation that we're pushing forward is technology neutral, and technology is our friend here. We've got so many different opportunities to deliver broadband and to close the digital divide, and I want you to have that choice. I've been working with the President to streamline permitting and to make certain that we have pushed bipartisan common sense solutions. Things like digging once, only once, when you're laying an interstate highway. So then you've got the conduit in place to carry that high-speed internet along our interstate highway systems. We've also made available through the Department of Agriculture's RUS program $600 million in grants. Many of our counties, our cities, our electric co-ops are availing themselves of these grants. They're going out through rural development, and they're going to be there for you to use, coupling those with the state grants and really expanding access. Rural areas cannot be left behind. That is why we are focused on the expansion of rural broadband.
I've been a businessman for much of my life, and I know how important it is to have a sensible balance between regulations that protect us and not going overboard like the European Union or something and turning everything into this bureaucratic mess. I learned about it firsthand, actually not far from where I'm standing right now, when I needed to get an approval to do some work on a pond, and found out that there was a very small wetland, one that I'd created myself, that presented a huge issue in terms of being able to just do some ordinary, sensible, limited work. It gave me some understanding of what it must be like to be a farmer and deal with these kinds of things day in and day out as you try to conduct your business and operate your farm. I'd like to be a force for putting some sensibility back into this regulatory environment. Look, we have got in this country to stop running up these huge deficits and adding to our debt more and more every year, leaving this huge problem for our children and grandchildren to solve. That's not the American way. Families all across Tennessee deal with this issue every year. They have to balance their income and their outgo, and they do so, and they make choices, and sometimes the choices are hard. During the time I was governor, I balanced 8 budgets honestly. We had to make some very tough choices to do that, but in the end, we're a healthier state, and we're not leaving here our children and grandchildren with these huge problems to deal with. I'd like to bring with me to Washington some of this experience in balancing budgets and this real desire to actually honestly balance the budgets in our country. We've got to change and turn around this disastrous course that we're on. I don't have to tell anyone watching this that agriculture is very important to Tennessee's economy and that exports are very important to Tennessee agriculture. We have some trade issues with China, intellectual property, difficulties of doing business. We need to deal with them with a scalpel, not with a broad axe and creating all this collateral damage to our export markets. We're a very powerful country economically, and we ought to use that power for the benefit of our citizens. But we use it best when we open up markets for our products, not when we close them down. The H-2A program and its problems is a perfect example of what happens when you so deeply politicize every issue and turn it into a Democrat versus Republican or shouting across the room issue with each other. That program is vital to American agriculture. It's an important one to have. It has some problems that have developed over the years. And we need to put aside the bickering and settle down and figure out how to deal with this issue, how to cut through some of the red tape that exists, how we need to modernize and refine these regulations so that the agricultural community can get the workforce that they need to do their job and to prosper. The Farm Bill, which is reauthorized every 5 years, is an important part of just the agricultural infrastructure here in our country. Farmers depend on its provisions to be able to make the decisions about investments, make the decisions about how they're going to conduct their operations in the years ahead. I support these farm bills. I will support them when I'm in the U.S. Senate, and will also take the time to listen to farmers, to members of the agricultural community in general, as to what needs to be considered, what new things might need to be taken up in the next one that comes along. This is an important piece of our farming infrastructure. It's not metal or seeds, but it's important nonetheless, and I'd like to be there for you all and be a friend to you. Today, the internet is fast becoming just as important to communities as electricity or telephone was, half a century ago. And unfortunately, in Tennessee, we have a lot of rural communities that don't have good broadband access. Fortunately, we also have TVA, which back in the 30s was the vehicle that was used to deliver electricity into rural areas. And one of the things I've proposed is, let's take TVA and move it back to some of its original roots, its original DNA, and put it to work, making sure that every place in our state has got good access to the internet. It's important for communication, it's important for shopping, it's important for getting information, and no community should be without it. We've long had a policy, a goal in our country of making sure that no matter where you lived, you've got access to the basic services it takes to have a good life and to earn a living. Even from the beginning of our country, we delivered mail everywhere, not just in urban areas. We need to get back to that fundamental belief, that principle, and making sure that the internet is available throughout Tennessee, whether it's rural or urban or any place in between, is an important next step in our growth as a state. I'm running for the Senate because in my life I feel I've still got some unfinished business. I believe in just getting things done. My whole life has been about, my time in the public sector has been about putting aside partisan differences, putting aside shouting and posturing, and just figuring out how to get some things done. When I've tried as governor to deal with some of the challenges in the agricultural community, I mean, I didn't talk about how I really liked the agricultural community or was going to give some little grant somewhere. We put together the Ag Enhancement Program, which has put a huge amount of money into direct support for things that the community, that farmers really need to conduct their business. I want to bring that same notion to Washington. Let's stop fooling around the edges. Let's settle down and tackle some big problems, do it together, and we'll have a better state and a better country when we start doing that.
I know that to you all, you're watching very closely what happens with the Farm Bill. I am also. And we are hopeful that this is going to get finished and soon be on its way to President Trump's desk. We fully understand the importance of that. I want to encourage you to continue your conversations with me. As your next U.S. Senator, I'm someone who's going to take those Tennessee values to Washington, D.C. I'm going to work with you to make certain that issues like addressing the Farm Bill, addressing visas and immigration, making certain that we keep the tax cuts, that we get federal judges on the bench, rolling back the Affordable Care Act and getting that off the books so that you have access to quality health care at a price that you can afford. I would appreciate your vote and look forward to serving you as your U.S. Senator. Thank you so much.